You ever look at a company, one that's doing, really cool stuff, an innovator maybe,
Oh, yeah?
but then you see that stock price and you just think, well, okay, it's not for me.
Right. $1,000 a share,
Mhm.
sometimes more. It's a lot.
Exactly. It feels like looking at this amazing restaurant menu where everything just costs a fortune. But what if you could just order like a taste, a single bite?
That's a good way to put it.
Well, that's kind of what we're diving into today. Fractional shares.
Hmm.
Think of it like owning just a slice of the pizza,
Right.
or maybe even just a crumb of a company's stock instead of meeting the whole pie.
A much smaller, more manageable piece.
So, our mission here really is to get under the hood. What are these things? Why are they suddenly, such a big deal? How do they actually work?
And importantly, what do you need to keep in mind?
Exactly. What you absolutely need to know if you're thinking about maybe using them.
Well, you touched on it. Traditionally, if a stock was, say, $1,000 a share,
Hmm.
that was it. That was your entry ticket.
One ticket, one price.
Yep. You needed the full grand just to get in the door, to be a shareholder.
Yeah.
And for a lot of people, I mean, especially if you're just starting out or watching your budget,
Yeah, totally.
they just put some really interesting, potentially high growth companies completely, well, out of reach.
Right. You'd be tracking a company, thinking this has potential. Maybe you even use their stuff every day.
You believe in it.
But the cost of just one share felt like this huge wall you couldn't climb.
Uh-huh.
But fractional shares, they've really changed that whole picture, haven't they?
We really have.
Now, instead of needing that whole $1,000, you could what? Put in maybe $5? $1?
Potentially, yes. Depending on the broker, you could invest a very small amount in that exact same stock.
And own a tiny, tiny piece. But it's real.
It's real ownership. It's simple math, really, but the impact is huge, especially for people who felt locked out before.
So the biggest thing is just access, getting your foot in the door.
Absolutely. That's the immediate, most obvious impact.
Yeah.
Accessibility. You don't need that big lump sum anymore to start building an investment portfolio.
Okay.
It just dramatically lowers that barrier to entry for so many people.
And it's not just about like buying your very first stock either, is it? This is where it gets really interesting for me. It totally changes how you can think about diversification.
Oh, definitely. Explain that.
Well, if you only had, say, $100 to invest before,
Right.
you might only be able to afford one share, maybe two, of some cheaper stock.
Your options were limited.
Very limited.
Fact.
But with fractional shares, that same $100, wow, you could spread that across little tiny slivers of maybe 5, 10, I don't know, even more companies,
Yeah,
different sectors.
precisely. And diversification, as you know, it's just fundamental. It's investing 101 for managing risk.
Yeah, don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Exactly. And fractional shares make that principle much more achievable, especially if you don't have a lot of capital to start with. So instead of being concentrated in just one or two whole shares, you can strategically spread small amounts across a much wider range of assets.
Which helps cushion things if one investment doesn't do so well.
Absolutely. It can help smooth out the ride, cushion against volatility, and being able to spread even small amounts like that over time, especially if you start early, that can really add up in terms of risk-adjusted returns.
Okay, okay. And what about those really big names, the ones always in the headlines trading at, eye-watering prices?
Household names, yeah.
Suddenly, those aren't just for like the Wall Street big shots or the super rich anymore.
That's right. You can actually own a piece of that giant tech company or that innovator everyone's talking about,
Even if it's just 0.01 of a share.
even if it's just a tiny fraction. It brings those companies that seemed totally unattainable, well, within reach.
So how does this actually work? Like behind the curtain, if I put in $10 for a $1,000 stock, what's happening?
Yeah, the mechanics are pretty interesting. So when you place an order for a fractional share, You're usually doing it through an online brokerage platform that offers them.
Okay.
That platform basically acts as the middleman. They take your small order and lots of other small orders from other investors.
Ah, they bundle them up.
Exactly. They aggregate them, pool them together until they have enough to buy whole shares of the company on the actual market.
So wait, it's kind of like crowdfunding, but for buying stock. Lots of small bits making up a whole.
That's a really good analogy, actually.
Yeah.
Yes. Once the brokerage buys those whole shares,
Then what?
then their systems, their technology kicks in. It divides up that whole share and allocates the correct fractional ownership back to each individual investor based on how much they put in.
Oh.
It all relies heavily on some pretty sophisticated tech to track who owns what tiny slice, and it's often tied into those zero commission trading models we see a lot now.
So basically, I tap my phone a few times, say I want $30 of this expensive car company, and the platform does all that coordinating stuff in the background.
That's the user experience, yeah.
Yeah.
Seamless, ideally.
Seems incredibly efficient. Okay, so you mentioned a few important things for people to keep in mind here. First off, even if it's just a fraction, it's still real ownership, right?
Mhm.
This isn't like a video game.
No, absolutely not. It's tangible. It represents real proportional ownership in that company.
Proportional. Okay.
So if the company does well and the stock price goes up, the value of your fraction goes up by the same percentage.
And if it goes down?
Same thing, proportionally. It perfectly mirrors the performance of a whole share,
Yeah.
just on a smaller dollar scale.
Okay, fundamental point. Got it. Now, something I know people ask about, what about voting rights? I feel like I read somewhere that might be different with fractions.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, and there's some nuance there. So the initial thought is often, well, voting rights are tied to whole shares, right?
Right. One share, one vote kind of thing.
But the reality for most brokers offering fractional shares is that fractional shareholders do effectively have voting rights. It just works a bit differently.
How so?
Well, the brokerage firm, the one holding the whole shares that your fraction is part of, they aggregate all the fractional ownership from all their clients who own that stock.
Okay.
They then tally those fractions up. So all those little point ones and point two fives add up, and the brokerage typically votes those shares proportionally based on how the fractional owners voted, or sometimes according to board recommendations if they don't get specific instructions.
Ah, so I might not get a personal ballot for my, say, 0.15 of a share,
Probably not directly, no.
but my little piece still gets counted in the bigger pool that the brokerage votes?
Exactly. Your ownership still contributes to the overall shareholder voice exercised by the brokerage on behalf of all its fractional holders. It's a collective representation.
That's a really crucial distinction. Okay, good to know. You also mentioned broker availability. Not everyone offers this yet.
Precisely. It's become much more common, especially with newer online brokers, but it's not universal. Not every single brokerage platform offers fractional shares.
So, homework required.
Yeah. If this is something you specifically want access to, you definitely need to check if your current broker offers it or maybe shop around for one that does.
Right. Okay, so we've covered the why and the how, the benefits, but are there any limitations, downsides? Can't be all sunshine, can it?
That's a fair question. A balanced view is important. One key limitation to understand is about trading them.
Okay.
You generally can't buy or sell fractional shares directly on the open stock market like you can with whole shares.
Meaning,
Meaning your transactions, buying or selling that fraction, are typically restricted to the brokerage platform where you bought it in the first place. They facilitate the buying and selling within their customer base or their own inventory.
okay, so if I have like point 0.3 shares of company X on broker A, I can't just easily transfer that point 0.3 shares directly over to broker B.
Generally speaking, no. That direct transfer of a fraction isn't usually possible.
So what would I do?
You'd likely have to sell the fractional position on broker A, take the cash.
And then buy it again on Broker B.
Right. Either as a fraction again, if Broker B offers it, or maybe save up for a whole share there.
Gotcha. Any other things to consider?
Well, just the obvious point about income. If the company pays dividends,
Yeah.
you'll get dividends on your fractional share, but it will be proportional to your ownership.
So a fraction of the dividend payment.
Exactly. If a whole share gets a $1 dividend and you own half a share, you'll get 50 cents. It's logical, but just worth remembering it's a smaller slice of the dividend pie, same as it's a smaller slice of the company.
Makes total sense. Okay, so let's maybe zoom out for a second here. The big picture. What's the real takeaway? The significance of all this?
I think fundamentally it's about democratizing investing. That word gets used a lot, but here it feels pretty accurate. They just significantly knocked down those financial walls that kept a lot of people out of the stock market before.
Hmm.
Owning a piece of the companies you actually use or believe in,
Yeah.
it's much more possible now.
It really does feel like it makes the whole stock market thing less intimidating, more accessible, for a much wider range of people.
Absolutely.
It lets people start building wealth, even if they're starting small, with really modest amounts. And that diversification point you made, that's huge too.
It really is. Being able to diversify more effectively, even with smaller sums, is a very powerful benefit for managing risk long term.
So it empowers investors, really.
Exactly. It empowers them to build portfolios that might look more like what previously only people with much larger amounts could achieve.
Mm-hmm.
Getting exposure to companies, spreading risk,
Mm-hmm.
it just opens doors.
So the core message here is pretty clear then. It's just easier now. Easier than ever to own a piece, even a tiny piece of the companies you follow, regardless of how expensive one single share might be.
That sums it up well.
And if that big financial hurdle, that stock price barrier, is lower than it's ever been, well, it really makes you think, doesn't it? What new possibilities does that actually unlock for your own financial future?
It's a great question to ponder.
Yeah, definitely something to consider, How this kind of accessibility might fit into your own goals, your own strategy,
Hmm.
what kind of portfolio you could start building, maybe just one fractional share at a time.
Thanks for watching the entire video. Visit us again for more informative and educational videos. Have a great day.